Do you think Europe isn't taking enough action against Russia? I mean, what can they do? I guess the only thing they could do is like unironically disband NATO and directly train up a standing military force and then send them into Russia. The countries without, is that like without America, there is no NATO. Okay.
Last night in the Black Sea port of Odessa, the aftermath of a Russian drone strike. It was the second day.
Yeah, Trump cuts intelligence sharing with Kyiv is crazy. Trump is treating Ukraine in ways that I wish he would actively treat Israel, or any administration would actively treat Israel. Okay? Israel deserves everything that Donald Trump is doing to Ukraine. Like 100%. Like a stern talking to, a public dressing down, refusing to collaborate on the intelligence front, denying transfers. It's crazy that he's doing that to Ukraine and not to fucking Israel. Oh,
day in a row, the city had come under attack.
Bro is asking for the next band, no Kizzy. Yeah, I know. Yeah, I've never said these things about Israel before. Why do you think everybody comes in here and calls me a terrorist, dude? It's quite literally this.
This morning, residents were assessing the damage. One person was killed, power and water services cut off. Ukraine's war-ravaged population, worried by Russia's gradual battlefield advance and America's sudden withdrawal of crucial support.
The city suffers more now, the country too. Even in the beginning of the war, it was not on this level. Many houses were damaged, people were forced on the streets, whole families. It's scary.
Today, it emerged the US has stopped sharing vital intelligence with Ukrainian forces, in addition to cutting off military aid. Yet more fallout from last week's disastrous meeting between Presidents Trump and Zelensky.
American intelligence data is regarding Russian strategic bombers. We are tracking Russian ballistic missiles with its help. But also, of course, we have another part of American intelligence data regarding the moving targets on the Russian territory, which provides us with the possibility to make it.
It's not Mike Johnson, dude. It's his chief of staff. You guys, please learn how to read, okay? Mike Johnson's chief of staff was arrested on DUI charge. Yes, and Mike Johnson says he stands by him, and he has full faith and confidence in him. They're probably going to elevate him to a higher position now that he got a DUI arrest. That's how it works. That's how in the modern Republican Party now.
The deep strikes into the Russian territory on him.
Trump's strong-arming of Zelensky looks to have paid off. Last night, he told Congress he'd received a letter from the Ukrainian leader.
The letter reads, Ukraine is ready to come to the negotiating table as soon as possible,
promising to begin peace negotiations and to sign a rare earth mineral deal. Today, a top Trump official held out the possibility of a resumption of support.
We have taken a step back and are pausing and reviewing all aspects of this relationship. But I just got off the phone before I walked out here with my counterpart, the Ukrainian National Security Advisor. I think we're going to see movement in very short order.
But it's clear to America's allies, old relationships don't count for much with the new US administration. In an effort to boost self-reliance in Germany, politicians forming a new government announced plans to drastically change a constitutional cap on borrowing to boost defense spending. Europe needs to be able to defend itself, said the man set to become the new chancellor. In Britain, the Prime Minister still hopes to persuade President Trump to provide Ukraine with more tangible assurances.
The President made absolutely clear his commitment to Article 5 of NATO, absolutely clear that he would have our backs because of the relationship between our parties, and agreed that our teams would sit down together to talk through security guarantees.
But Ukraine is now fighting in a very different world, and it's one in which its enemy, Russia, clearly has the upper hand.
About an hour ago, Emmanuel Macron made a roughly 14-minute speech from the Élysée Palace in Paris, which signalled a change in attitude towards defence, not just in France, but Macron calling for the same across Europe. He wants Europe to unite, to get behind Ukraine in its existential fight against Russia's invasion. Emmanuel Macron unveiled a plan to increase French defence spending by 20 billion euros over the next 5 years. This, he says, will be a private-public partnership to, he says, avoid any tax increases on French citizens in order to fund that. He says it's essential that Europe unites to secure future peace, future security. He said Russia is now the enemy and cannot be trusted. He cited Vladimir Putin specifically on this issue. He cited the fact that Russia has twice broken treaties, namely the Minsk treaties over the issues in Ukraine, 2014, 2015, and he says that basically it is impossible to take Vladimir Putin at his word. He says Russia will be boosting its defenses, its army, its as it goes along. He said Russia has made this a world conflict by bringing in Iran and North Korea and, to an extent, China in terms of the use of arms on the ground. And he said that Europe has a duty now to work together to create more security and to lend its support to Ukraine. Let's take a listen to the French president.
La Russie As I speak to you and for the foreseeable, Russia has become a threat to France and Europe. I deeply regret this, and I'm convinced that in the long term, peace will return to our continent with Russia once again at peace. But this is the situation I'm describing to you, and we have to live with it. Faced with this dangerous world, it would be foolish to remain a spectator. Without further delay, we must make decisions for Ukraine, for the security of the French, for the security of Europeans.
So security, the big issue that Emmanuel Macron was at pains to outline there, basically the increase of spending, 20 billion euros extra from now until 2030 is his way, he says, of reindustrializing certain parts of France. So that is something from the social aspect to look at in terms of increasing jobs, which is almost a welcome issue in many.
Do you think Europe isn't taking enough action against Russia? I mean, what can they do? I guess the only thing they could do is like unironically disband NATO and directly train up a standing military force and then send them into Russia, the countries without nukes, you know? Is that like without America, there is no NATO, okay? There's just no NATO without the United States of America. NATO is an expression of American empire in the region. And as a part of that, it also creates this nuclear blanket. It is the deterrence side of NATO in times when Russia does behave like an irredentist nation, given its interest in seizing more and more territory. Okay, that's the only way forward, because aside from that, an act of aggression against a NATO soldier is an act against all of NATO, which means the United States of America as well. That's not true. Europe with UK and Canada is bigger than the USA. Okay, you don't know what you are talking about. Please explain, Daddy Hagrid 420. Why couldn't they act without America? Because an act of aggression against a NATO nation, in the beginning of the war, after Russia invaded, Zelensky kept repeatedly asking for a no-fly zone to be implemented over Ukrainian airspace. No-fly zone is not like a random protective barrier that you magically put over a nation state. It is something that you actively have to enforce through violence, as in, Zelensky's demands were, please send NATO fighter jets to actively target and combat Russian fighter jets. Okay? If that were to, and that of course didn't happen, right? And the reason why it didn't happen is because if they were to have sent any NATO fighter jets into Ukrainian territory, and then they would get into active battle with the Russian Air Force, this would spell World War III. It would spell nuclear conflict. Because you're an American pussy, suck my big, hairy, Hagrid tits, pussy. Pussy. Oh, okay. Well, thank you for your feedback. That's cool. You've brought up some really important points. You're right. If Russian soldiers or NATO forces killed one another, Article 5 will be implemented, which means that the United States of America and virtually everyone else inside of NATO would be going into war with Russia. Russia is a nuclear armed country, and so is the United States of America. The entire purpose of these nukes, as they exist, is supposed to be so that if you do go into war, you turn around and you use those nukes.
Parts of the country, but on a broader scale and a pan-European scale, it's a question of creating a platform from which the continent can defend itself and, at this point in time, lend its support to Volodymyr Zelensky and Ukraine's fight against Vladimir Putin and Russia. James Andre.
Europe has over 200 nukes, so we don't need America for those. What is this European death wish that people have? I don't want NATO to go to war with Russia. I don't want Europe to go to war with Russia without NATO support either. It seems to me like Europeans are just like, nah, let's just go to nuclear war. We got nukes. We can take the smoke. Like, what the hell? Are you guys all right?
Has been observing matters for us. He joins us now live from the Elysee Palace. James, President Macron here, in many ways, opening the door to a different kind of future in terms of defence for France and Europe.
Yes, absolutely. Emmanuel Macron, who really wanted to offer something very didactic today and to try and convince the French people that indeed they needed to shift gears, that basically the recipes of the past could not apply to what is happening now across Europe. Emmanuel Macron, that we've been seeing over the past few days in a flurry of diplomatic activity. We saw him indeed last Sunday. He was in London on the 24th of February. He was in Washington, basically showing support for Volodymyr Zelensky, and this is the message he really clearly hammered to the French public. You know, we must back Volodymyr Zelensky. He said we need to back Ukraine in order to achieve sustainable, solid peace, to protect Ukraine, but also to protect Europe, and also explaining to the French public that yes, there will be more military spending, that obviously he does not want to hike taxes, but what he wants to do, he says, is to redistribute the spending of the nation, which he says means there will be sacrifices, there will be tough choices to make, but also calling upon the French public to mobilize, to get ready, and indeed to get ready to defend France and its values in the face of what has become, as he put it, you know, a renewed threat coming from the east. Emmanuel Macron saying that indeed tomorrow at this European summit, it will really be the kickstarting of a European defence, that rules would be changed inside the Union in order to allow countries to have deficit if that money is spent on defence, but also, you know, creating financial mechanisms, reindustrializing France, basically recreating a whole economy of the defence that needs to be sovereign and that needs to be integrated here in France.
Indeed, Macron says also he will open debate about extending the French nuclear umbrella to EU partner nations. James, bear with us a second, because as you've been observing, at the Elysee, Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban has arrived for a special pre-summit supper with the French president. Now, this a very high honour indeed being paid to Viktor Orban. His visit comes as US President Trump has ordered the suspension of US military aid deliveries to Kyiv and a halt in intelligence sharing, which is a real blow to Ukraine's troops in trying to fend off that Russian invasion. The feeling in many European capitals is that Trump's America is pivoting away from its allies toward Moscow. Orban, of course, one of Trump's and Moscow's closest allies in the European Union, said a transatlantic rift over Russia's invasion of Ukraine became apparent over recent days. I think that's an understatement, isn't it? Macron has hatched a four-point plan, of course, to end the Ukraine war, but the main beneficiary from US actions over the past week is clearly Russia and Vladimir Putin. Let's go back to James Andre, who is observing matters for us at the Elysee. James, Viktor Orban then and Emmanuel Macron, I imagine that this will be a supper that involves a lot of talking as well.
Yes, absolutely. Well, we saw Viktor Orban arrive just earlier on here and be greeted by Emmanuel Macron here with the full Republican Guard. This is a state dinner, and this is obviously an honor that's being paid to Viktor Orban.
How can you do World War III without nukes is the question that someone asked. You can't. Or rather, this is how World War III is happening without nukes. A sequence of proxy battles with nukeless nations. A nation with nukes going after a nation without. That's basically it.
Discuss. As you know, Viktor Orban, this was just last week when the European Union decided to renew sanctions on Russia, threatened to use its veto power in order to avoid that happening. Viktor Orban has been quite clear about the fact that he is ready to use his position in the European Union to block the building, or at least to slow down the creation of this European defense. And this, of course, is something that Emmanuel and discuss with the Hungarian president. This is the point of this dinner, to get him on board, probably to try and convince him that he has more to win by staying allied to the European Union rather than pivoting towards Russia. Well, he's already an ally of Russia, but basically finding himself in this American-Russia camp. So we'll see how he responds to this. This is also, of course, to prepare tomorrow's special summit, the European Union summit, where these first bricks of this renewed European defense need to be laid. And of course, the idea is to avoid Viktor Orban impeding that progress.
James Andre at the Elysee Palace in Paris, the official residence of Emmanuel Macron, French president. James, thank you, as always, very much indeed.
Earlier.
Yeah, we're gonna sidestep from Ukraine ceasefire efforts to Donald Trump, who first truthed this thing, and then now has posted on the POTUS account